Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the teaching method lesson. For this specific lesson, we're going to look at Unit 2, which focusing on the ESL policy and the syllabi that you potentially use when you graduate from UNAM. So this, instead of having one long lesson with focusing on all the on all these documents, we are going to divide it into 4 parts. The first one is focusing on the policy, the language policy. The second one is going to focus on the junior, senior certificate syllabus, and then the NSSCO syllabus, and then the NSSCAS syllabus. All right, so that's what we're going to do in this unit, but then there'll be 4 parts. All right. As I've mentioned, we're going to look at the National Subject Policy Guide for English Secondary Language. As we can see here, the language policy is not just focused or limited to senior secondary, but rather it covers upper primary, junior secondary, and senior secondary phase, and that's now grades 5 to 12. But keep in mind, though, that this was published in 2009, yet right now we are using a different curriculum. So we are just hoping that soon we'll get a newer language policy, which is updated. All right. So that's the cover page and Ministry of Education. So the people who the copyright, like people who have compiled this syllabus, is NIED and Ministry of Education, and this was done in 2008. I think that's when they've started working on it, and it was published. Oh yeah, publication date is 2008, but it was used, I believe, starting from 2009. For every document that you have, for you not to waste your time if you're looking for certain parts of the document that you're using, you have to use your table of content. I trust by now you know that. Instead of wasting your time flipping through the whole document, you have this guide, table of content, to guide you as to which pages to look at when you are looking for certain topics. All right. As you can see here, we have got the introduction, we have got the aims of the national subject policy, we have subject-specific issues, and subject-specific issues are divided into 12 components. So here we have them. And then we have got the subject management issues, like line of management, monitoring learners' written work, subject meeting, and all that kind of stuff. So it's divided. Subject management issues are divided into 8 components. And then we've got the operational files, and these are divided into 5 sections. And in the end, we have got the annex, and we have got one which is focusing on the we have a sample of a lesson plan format, and then we have got the year planner, and then we have got the scheme of work. And I mean, if you're looking for something specific, then you can use the table of content, as I've mentioned before. Now, looking at the introduction, I mean, when we go through this lesson, it's just to go over it as fast as possible, because I've already given you an activity for you to focus on certain aspect of it. All right, and I hope that you have taken time to really go through the document rather than rushing through or copying somebody's answers when you did the classwork that I have given you, the task that I've given you regarding this document. In any case, in the introduction, so as they've introduced us to this document by mentioning that we have to come back to this document to ensure, us as teachers, to come back to this document to ensure that we are within the guidelines that the ministry have established. All right. What else can we say here? Okay, this policy is applicable. I've already mentioned that it's applicable from upper primary, junior secondary, and senior secondary phases, and it is very essential for us now teachers to consult the National Curriculum Basic Education document to get like the specific guidelines that the ministry has for us, because this document does not have all the guidelines, only some of the guidelines, but we need to know other guidelines that are stipulated in the national curriculum for basic education. And we should also keep in mind that this document does not have all the guidelines, all the, let's say, internal guidelines, because internal guidelines are the ones that are created by the schools. So this one just has the general external ones, but for each school will have its own internal subject policy as well regarding the submission of, let's say, papers, the typing of paper and moderation of paper, and test paper or examination paper, things like that. Those are internal issues that the school has to create. And then we've got the aim. Like, what is the aim of the national subject policy? We'll just look at this. Provide guidelines for subject managers in controlling teaching and learning activities. And then we also have got guide teachers in organizing their administrative duties and in planning teaching and learning to meet the expectations that the national standards and performance indicators the ministry has established. And those we can find in the national curriculum for basic education as well. And as well as the syllabus. I think those are the documents, some other documents that you can find those indicators. All right, and then now we are moving on to part section 3, which is subject specific issues. What do the phases and appropriate gates compose of? This one we can't really keep to it anymore because certain things have changed. All right, as you know, okay, for example, here we have got, I think now this is we have got some changes, when it comes to grades. For instance, we don't have grade 8 to 10 anymore. We have got grade 9, grade 10 to 11. So this is now the senior secondary, and then we've got 12. That is now the advanced level. And here, okay, for the upper primary, I'm not very sure how they've divided them. But I do know that they still have, I think they took, grade 9 is now part of the upper primary, right? Because I remember that certain secondary school, if I'm not mistaken, they have taken away the grade 9 and put it to the upper primary for some reason, and it has caused some confusion, if I'm not mistaken. But so here there are some changes, but I think the cycles are still the same. The periods and cycles are still the same. Timetabling. When it comes to the English language timetables, they advise that the lessons should be spread out throughout the week, and then one should also have some double classes to focus on continuous writing or continuous assessment that the learners will be working on, or it could be even speaking. Like if they have presentation, it will always be good to use the double classes so that you can cover as many groups as possible. But the timetabling, again, it has an aspect of the internal influence where the schools themselves, they have to decide on how they're going to set up their timetable. All right, not like this, no cookie cutter structure that everybody should follow, but the schools would decide on how to set up the timetable. And then we have got the syllabi, the syllabuses. Syllabuses is plural of syllabus, right? And sometimes you can say syllabi is also a plural of syllabus. In any case, a syllabus is now a document that describes the course within the curriculum. It consists of, it's concise and it has it is a concise and general statement of intended learning, which is described in describes the following, like the purpose of the subject. So these are the aspects that you'll find in the syllabus, and we'll see that shortly. We have got the purpose of the subject. What is the purpose? Like the rationale and the aim of the course, and the direction that it will take, and then the content. So this is basically described in terms of themes and topics, and in the language syllabus, the language skills are the themes and topics. The content is like it's divided into language skills, like listening, speaking. We'll see, and I think you have already seen it because you have done the activity. And then the content is then the content. It's divided into skills, and the skills are divided into objectives and competency. The objectives is defined in terms of what learning is intended to happen. What learning is intended to happen at the level of the subject, and competencies are the significant cognitive operations, skills, attitudes, and values which all learners should be able to demonstrate, and they'll be assessed in. All right, so these are now the skills, the attitude, the values that the learners need to get, and then at the end, they need to get from the lesson, they need to demonstrate that they have acquired that, and then you will assess them. And then we have got now the assessment part, which is how you are going to evaluate or assess whether the students have attained, this. And there are also like guidelines of how they will be assessed. All right, all that is described in the syllabus. It's like stated in the syllabus. As a language teacher or whatever your other major is, you need to be familiar with the syllabus, because your teaching will be guided by the syllabus and not necessarily by the textbook, because we tend to also follow the textbook rather than the syllabus. But be sure that your teaching is guided by the syllabus rather than the textbook, because in the end, what will happen is that your students, in the final examination, they'll be assessed based on the syllabus components of the syllabus. All right, do not disadvantage your learner by focusing on the textbook only. And here they tell you like where to keep the syllabus. We have subject file and preparation file. That's where you need to put your where you need to put your files. Subject file, I think that's the one that is compiled by the subject head. But then for you need to put yours in the preparation file. And then we have got the scheme of work. The scheme of work now is it's a plan of what to cover throughout the year, or whatever the different phases, and it should be it's divided into terms, like first term, second term, and third term, and the scheme of work is derived from the syllabus. So in other words, when you're going to do your lesson preparation here, you're supposed to be consulting your scheme of work, and then the hope is that your scheme of work contains all the information, all the necessary learning content that has been stated in the syllabi. All right, because you don't want to miss out on anything, because you just don't know what they're going to assess in the end, or you have to make sure that the learners have acquired the values, attitudes, and skills that have been stated in the syllabus. All right. So that's what we have. And the syllabus is created by the subject teachers. All right. If you're lucky, you go to a school, they have it already. You just need to modify it if necessary. But then you don't modify it on your own. You still have to consult other teachers who are teaching the same subject. All right. And it should be created at the very beginning of the year before the classes begin. All right. And we'll see that we have a sample of a scheme of work. Like, how does it look like at the end of this document. And then we have got the written lesson preparation. This is now the lesson plans. And they say that it's compulsory for you to, write up a lesson plan before you go to class. That could be daily or weekly. All right, depends on how you plan. And the main components of the lesson plan, there should be a date, time, theme, topic, teaching and learning materials, learning objective, basic competencies to be achieved. And then the lesson plan should have, when it comes to the presentation, it should have a short, appropriate introduction, and then monitor of the homework, presentation of the subject, and a conclusion. All right. So within your lesson plan, the first thing that you could do is maybe monitor the students' previous homework, and then you have an introduction of the new topic that you're going to present if it's new, and then the presentation of the content. All right, so the steps of what the teacher and the learners need to do within the lesson, and then at the end you should have a conclusion of recapping of the main points that you have taught in the body. All right, during the presentation of the content, and not necessarily in the introduction. And then they also suggest that there should be compensatory teaching component, where you have to write ideas of what to work on with the students who are lacking or who are behind, who have not really captured the content that you have presented in the lesson. And then there should be continuous assessment. That could be homework or whatever task that you're going to give them, other tasks that you can give them apart from what you have presented. And then and then you need to have, at the end, when you are done with the whole presentation of your lesson, you should have a reflection. All right, critical reflection of what had happened in the class. And you have to be honest when it comes to critical reflection. You have to really think of what happened in the class. You have to be honest. All right, don't be too hard on yourself and don't be too lenient on yourself. If things didn't work out, what needs to change? What could you have maybe done? And then you try out whatever that you have thought about in the next lesson to see if it's really going to work. Because when it comes to lesson presentation, know that it's not always going to be successful. All right, there will be moments when it might not turn out the way you want it to turn out. And then next we have got the homework. The quality of homework is very important, for academic success. That's true. So which means that you really need to plan out your homeworks. All right, don't just say and be very specific in the instructions that you give your learners. Don't just be very vague without helping the learners with the type of instructions and the type of activities that you have created. And rather than just making photocopies of homeworks that have been used previously, you might need to modify it to make sure that it's really capturing the objectives and the competency that you have presented in your lesson, in that specific lesson. Maximum time on task. So you have to use as much time as possible on your task rather than wasting time, ensuring that you all, the learners and the teachers, they attend all of their classes as indicated on the timetable. They show up on time and they leave on time so that you don't eat up time for the other teachers. You make sure that you have really thoroughly planned your lesson so that you don't waste your time on not knowing what to do with your learners. And then what else did I mention? And then you can learn examples of how to really provide quality time on task. You can learn that from management or the principal. But then again, I'll tell you that you have to be independent in the sense that you don't have to rely on other people all the time. You really have to decide for yourself that you are going to use the time that you are given for the learners to learn. And now we're moving on to the teaching and learning materials. Here, as teachers, we are advised to be very creative and innovative when it comes to teaching materials and learning materials, rather than just depending on the textbook, or rather than just using the materials that have been created by other people. You as a teacher, you need to empower yourself to create your own learning materials, because sometimes there might be a certain activity that you want to do, but then it's really the one that you have found is not focused on the competency or the objective of your lesson. So you might need to modify that to fit the objective and the competency of that lesson. And then you can also create from scratch, like your own activity from scratch, to help your learners attain the objective and competencies of the lesson. When it comes to the teaching learning materials, we have got the teacher manuals. All right. Teacher manuals, and then we have got other resources, which including those used to enhance ICT. All right. Other resources could be, okay, so we've got the teacher manual. Other resources could be like a computer, projector, to understand things like that you can use, a speaker, maybe a radio, I don't know, something like that you can use in the classroom. And those can be, you hope that, the government will provide that to the school. I mean, it depends on the school that you go to. You'll find that some schools have a lot of resources, some do not. But I will advise you to really invest in your own resources as well. For example, if a school does not have a speaker, maybe you have your portable speaker. You can use that in your classroom, and then we have got classroom display. They advise, teachers to display different posters and, you understand, on the walls. But then it might be difficult if maybe the students are the ones who, teachers are the ones who circulate, rather than the students circulating. I don't know. It depends on whatever school that you go to. Is it the teacher who moves around, or is it the learners who move around? But in any case, it's always good to their home classroom, right? And then for each teacher with their own classes to display, visual materials and the types on the walls for motivation. I feel like there's something about that. When I went for observation, I went to some schools, and some schools really do have great materials displayed on the walls, which is really amazing. It looks good if it's neat and well displayed, and the learners don't vandalize those materials they display. Yeah, this is just an ideal situation. They even say display should change regularly, but then people really have the resources? If they do have the resources, that would be great. But then if they don't, then unfortunately, it might not work. And then the display can also be the learner's class or homework. If they've created posters or whatever visual work that they have done, or written work that they have done, you can display those in your lesson. But keep the class very neat. And then we've got the textbooks. The textbooks that the learners use. All right. And when you decide on the textbook, it should be the textbook that are stated in the latest textbook catalog or resources that are available to the school and community, and not just whatever textbook that you decide that is best, but the ones that are suggested by the ministry. And then the exercise books, you have to tell your learners to have exercise books. And I think nowadays learners are given a list of books and exercise books that they need to buy, the amount of exercise books that they need to buy. And for English class, I think it's good to have an exercise book where they do the activity and another book where they write their summary. And then we have got specialized equipment. I mean, again, this is also depending on the environment in which you find yourself. You'll find that there are certain schools with labs, like computer labs or language labs for that matter, where they have, the recording. The learners can listen to different kind of, online resources, for example, or the ones that they have on their computers. You will get specialized equipment could also be recorders, and they say that the school should buy recorders, especially when it comes to the final examination. You need to do oral examination, and you need to have a recorder. And I don't remember, because it has been a while since I've been in schools like I've taught in high school. I don't remember if they do, the ministry itself provide the recorders, or the school buy their own recorders. I don't remember. But you can buy your own recorder too. Like, you need to invest in some of those resources, because the recorder you can also use for your other type of research, for instance. And then we have got now the assessment, and the assessment, assignment, project, and test, and CA. They are guided by these documents: the Syllabus, National Curriculum for Basic Education, Guidelines for Teacher Manual, if it's applicable, DNE, Directives, Formal Education, Circular on Assessment and Promotion, Guidelines for teachers on setting and marking assessment by DNE. So these are the documents that guide the type of assessment, like how to assess, and you should have records of the assessment that you have done with your learners, all right, and keep that in your administration file. It's always good to have that proof to see the progress of your learners, and in case the parents come and they want to know how their child or children are doing, then you can show that to them. It's always good to have that. Marking and moderation. The guidelines, for marking and moderation, we have here, they say that when you are marking the learner's work, you should use a red pen. Consolidation of test or examination should be marked and handed back to the learners as soon as possible, in accordance with the internal subject and homework policy. So the school has to decide on by when you should give back the work of the learners, and the learners should see the marks for the test. Examination scripts, I don't know how realistic that is. I don't think that we give the learners their examination script back before they see their report card, for example. I don't know how realistic that is. But for the test, though, it's always good to give it to them, and then they can count their marks, for example, and see. You go over how you've marked, and then maybe, because we are humans, we might have made errors when we are marking, and then the learners can rectify that, and then you correct their marks. And then the HOD should sample, moderate at least 5% of the papers that you have marked. For example, if you have 40 students and then you give the HOD or subject head needs to moderate at least 5% of the 40 learner scripts that you have marked. And marking of projects and assignments should be done. This one is basically the same as here, and then marked and then given back to the learners as soon as possible. And the approach that we use when we are teaching our learners is the learner-centered education approach. All right, learner-centered approach, whereby the learners are in the center of the learning, rather than the teacher doing a lot of talking, doing most of the work. The learners actually need to do more of the work in the classroom, right? And then this can be achieved by having small groups, and they have acknowledged that this approach might be challenging in bigger groups, but we still have to find ways. I think it's really doable to find ways to really have the students speak more, do the activity more, use the language more, rather than just listening to the teacher or listening to a few learners giving answers. Everybody should really be engaged. And then we have the advice for teachers is to continue, building on their professional careers. And this is called continuous professional development. Here they suggest that, for the schools to have in-service training, but this is not very common if we are being realistic, but it should be something that schools should focus on. But then, unfortunately, it's not an everyday thing. It does not happen all the time. It does not happen as often. So it's up to you as a teacher to take on this responsibility to read, use the different language journals to read up on what people are researching on, and learn from those resources. All right, and then online, with the access of online documents, you can really find good articles online regarding language teaching. And I think that's something that we should talk about later on. I'll give you a list of different journals that you may read, or online resources that you may read, that you may find. Right, I feel like access is really huge now. It's quite a lot. It's accessible. The resources are accessible to everyone with the internet. And then we are moving on to the subject management issues. The line of management, we do know that in a school the principal is the at the top of the management. Then we have the HOD, and then the subject head. And then we have got now the subject teachers. All right. And then here we have got now the description of the responsibility of the different people. So like, for example, the principal, what does he or she do? HOD, what are his or her responsibility? Subject head responsibility. It's quite a lot, like planning, organizing, leading and guiding, monitoring, all right, of the activities for the English subject. And then we have got now, when you go into schools, you'll be subject teachers, but you never know, you might be asked to become a subject head. If you have got leadership quality, then you can be asked to be a subject head. And then here now, what are the responsibilities? Here we've got the responsibilities that when you go into schools, you need to do things like strive towards achievement of the objective contained in the national standards and performance indicators of the schools in Namibia. Create conducive environment, like really good environment for the learning and the teaching to be of good quality. Establishing discipline, teaching and learning environment in the language class. So you have to also, establish discipline, come up with rules, and you can come up with rules with the learners as well, because when you involve them, they know that they are also part of the creation of rules, and then they can adhere to them more. And then we have got meeting the requirement of the curriculum and the English language syllabus, facilitate teaching and learning both inside and outside the classroom. So you have to create activities that are going to facilitate learning, inside and outside the classroom. And then develop an effective and efficient scheme of work, because your lesson preparation needs to be derived from the scheme of work, and you create the scheme of work from the syllabus. Establish positive attitude towards the learners, amongst the learners towards ESL. So this has everything to do with like motivation. The type of relationship that you have with the learners do affect with their engagement in the classroom. So you have to establish a really good attitude, a positive attitude with your learners, to have a love for learning a language. Promote the establishment of project work in ESL. You need to be creative and innovative in daily and weekly lesson preparation and the production of own learning and teaching materials. We have spoken about that. Don't just depend on the materials that are available to you. You can modify, or you can be inspired by what is already developed. All right. And then consult the nearest resource center in connection with training opportunities and resources of information, teaching and learning materials. I'm not sure about the teaching resources. I bet we do have teaching resources nearby the schools, but I'm not very aware of that. But I remember when I was teaching at Mashipandeka back then, they did have the teaching resources at the college, all right? The college then, but I'm not sure if they still do exist. I feel like with online resources being available, things are changing, things are changing. But then find out when you go to schools, like, do we have teacher resources so that you get inspired? Or even libraries around the school. If you're in the north, we have got different campuses around the country. You can use the libraries there to find resources to help you with preparation of your lesson. And then liaise with the subject head in regard with a smooth running of the subject. You always have to work with the subject head because, you have to create there are certain files that, like subject files, that are run by the subject head, and then you have to you collaborate to compile that file and making sure that you are doing what you need to do to really complete or finish the syllabus or the scheme of work. You are there to help each other. And then control and mark learners' written work and give feedback, not only written but also spoken oral work that the learners may have completed. Plan special activities to improve English reading, writing, spelling, even speaking, really, like even speaking. Those are things that you have to focus on, like how creative can you be to help your learners improve, and then communicate with parents. So those are our main responsibilities as teachers, subject teachers, main responsibility for you as teachers when you go into school. And then monitoring of learners' homework. It has to be a continuous thing, like you have to do it as often. And here we are told that you should at least mark 70 to 80% of the students' work rather than 100%. And the 20% could be learners marking themselves in the classroom. Alright, so that's what we have. Control the written work. And then paying attention to things like grammar, spelling, neatness, format, and display. Because you really have to help the learners improve on how to write legibly, correctly. The format is good. They need to also learn to be neat, things on grammar, even structure, spelling, stuff like that the learners, when they are doing their work. Yeah, and then when you give the learners feedback, it should be immediate. We need to learn to praise the learners when they do work, all right? Encourage them, be positive and informative when we give them their feedback. And the next aspect that we're going to look at is the subject meeting. They advise people to at least have that once semester. It could be often. It's a subject meeting, not the school, meeting. How do they call it? It's not the meeting that you have, like the general meeting that you have every morning, but rather you should have a meeting of your subject, where you talk about what's really happening in the classrooms, how are the learners learning, how, when you create activities together, how do they do, how do you then improve your methods, you talk about the methods that you're using, to help each other. It could also be feedback, feedback on any workshop. If somebody has attended a workshop, you can talk about that. You can talk about, ideas that you want to share with everybody to really help run the subject smoothly. And then we have got managing subject or phase materials. They say that you should have, let's say, if you have given learners textbooks, or if you have textbooks that you're sharing, there should be, procedures on how to, let's say, order, control the materials, distribute the materials, collect and annually stock take on the materials, because you want to know that you have all the books. Things are not missing. You have it there. All right. And then if you give books to the learners in the classroom, how do you ensure that you have all the books back and the kids, the learners, have not taken any of the books by mistake or on purpose. And then the next one is the advisory teacher. So the advisory teachers, I believe that they sit at the Ministry of Education. These are now the teachers who have like extensive knowledge on the subject, and then you as teachers, you need to consult them, or they're the one who kind of organize, workshop for teachers. They're the ones you need to consult if you have issues with the subject, all right, to ensure that there's quality in education. They render, the services to the teachers in the schools. And then we have got cluster subject groups. We're supposed to have that, so which means people from different schools within your cluster, they will have meetings, they'll have groups to really help each other with language teaching, building capacity, helping each other improve in methods, be efficient, empower each other to become better teachers, all right? And then it's always good to have meetings like this, so you need to attend and participate in these activities and collaborate with other people to improve the quality of teaching and learning. And then we've got teacher resource centers and school libraries. Some schools do have libraries, some do not. And again, it can be your initiative when you go to schools, if you don't have a library, to come up with a library to create a library, even a small library collection of books, and then you can ask like NGOs to donate books or donate funds for you to buy books, or even just businesses around your environment to donate funds to buy books. I feel like those are projects or initiatives that certain people will be happy to contribute towards. Teaching resource centers, I've mentioned, like in Ngwediva back then when I was teaching. It was really back then, like 2008, 2009. They had teacher resource center, and then they have a number of resources that you can use. But then with COVID and all that kind of stuff happening, it might be challenging, so using resources online might be also good. Maybe we need to have a teacher resource center, an online teacher resource center for English language. Could be an idea for us to do. And we have got school-based studies. So this is now studies that can be done in school, so classroom-based studies. And you can do this, it could also be part of your professional development, continuous professional development, whereby if you read an article suggesting a certain way, a certain method of teaching, you can try it out, and then you create some questionnaires to ask the learners to, on their feedback on what they think, what they think of this method that you have used. Was it effective? Did they really learn? Do you understand? Were they really engaged? Did you see that the learners were engaged? And you can record your lessons, and then do studies on how you have taught. All right, whatever method. For example, if it's really like a new method, then you record yourself. You write journal, even teaching journals of like every day when you have done a certain method, and you can use this data to write a paper, for instance, on what is happening in the school. I feel like that's something that we should also focus on. Continuous professional development, whereby we do research in the classroom. I know it's quite a lot of work, but it's worth it. Like, we make decisions based on the research rather than just from the whim, like what we think might be good, but we need to really base our decisions on like which methods to use based on the research that you have carried out. Now we are moving on to the last aspect, which is preparational files. We have got 5 files that you need to have. But here we've got a preparation file. Everybody needs to have a preparation file, and these are the components, the content that needs to be included. That's like daily lesson plans. They need to be there. And then we've got administration file, and these are the components or content or documents that needs to be in there. And then we have got the resource file. The resource file where you have like the worksheet, project assignment topics, practical investment artifacts, including marking criteria. So those are the things that you need to include in the resource file. And then we have got the subject file, which is compiled or is in the hands of the subject head, but you can work together with the subject head to compile this the file. And these are the things that you need to include in the subject file. So I advise you, encourage you to really read and have these files. And then we have the question paper file. Again, it's the responsibility of the subject teacher to compile or have control over, watch over, but anybody else who is teaching English can have access to the file. And then at the end, we have got now the annex. So here's an example of the lesson format. So a sample of how the lesson plan should look like. So we've got the names, dates, time, subject, and then materials that will be used, learning objective, competency, preparation of the lesson, so monitoring the homework. So that's the first thing that you will do if you've given the homework in the previous class. And then appropriate short introduction to really capture the students' attention and tap into their prior knowledge. And then the presentation here, so everything else that you have planned for that lesson to attain this objective and competency. And then consolidation, the conclusion of the lesson. And then we've got the assessment, homework, or task or exercises that you have for the learners. And here we have got reading activities, writing activities across, English across curriculum. So that's what we have. And you can have speaking and listening activities also stated here. All right, we're just not like focusing on reading and writing, but also other skills. And then across the curriculum, so relating it to other subjects. All right, things that you can do related to other subjects. So maybe let's say things like HIV, and these are things that they discuss in life skills, or global warming. These are things that they discuss in development studies or geography, stuff like that. And then compensatory teaching for the students who weren't able to really keep up in the lesson. Then what kind of teaching or activities are you going to give them or work with them on to help them achieve those? And then the reflection after you have presented everything, and then you reflect on the lesson. Was it successful? Yes or no? If not, why was it not successful? What are some of the things that you could have changed? What are some of the things that you have encountered, like the difficulties that you have encountered in a lesson? If it was successful, why do you say it was successful? What would you continue doing? Do you understand? And you have to be very, very honest when it comes to reflection, as I've mentioned before. All right, so that's what we have. And then we have got the year planner. It's always good to have a year planner. And nowadays we have things like diary. And then in your diary you write like, when does the school open? When do you hand out textbooks? When do they have the first test? When do you have parents meeting, preparation of book reports, presentation of book reports? Do you understand? When does the school close for the first semester? Do you understand? You have to have those things. Like, when do you have the meetings, so that you don't miss out on anything important? All right. It's good to have a planner. And then we have got 3 terms. You can use this specific one, or you can use your diary, like buy a diary and then write all the important appointments and tasks that you need to complete that year. And then next we have got, now the last one is the scheme of work, and this is how the scheme of work can look like. I mean, scheme of works do change too, just like the lesson plans. Lesson plans aren't always the same. This is like the one that the ministry has provided, but then when you go to schools may have different lesson plans as well. And the university also has its own lesson plan that I will share with you I will share with you in this course. And what else? do we have? Yeah, and then we have got the scheme of work. The scheme of work also might vary and be different depending on the schools, but then these are some of the main components of it, like the weeks. All right, week 1, 2, 3, and the skills that you will focus on, and objectives, competencies, language usage, learning activity, CA, continuous assessment, how are you going to assess it, resources that are going to be used, and then a section where you have date completed, just ensuring that, oh yeah, all this content we have completed, and then indicate when you have completed, because you want to make sure by the end of the year you have completed all these sections within the scheme of work. All right, so that's what we have. We're going to look at the activity that I've given you based on this document. All right, the true or false section. What do we have? In the English language policy, there are specific guidelines for promoting learning and teaching the content subject that they need to follow without modification. So do we really have specific guidelines that, every teacher need to follow without changing? Well, that is not true. It's false. There aren't specific guidelines. Those are up to the teachers themselves and the schools themselves to decide on how they're going to teach their learners. This subject policy is only usable for senior secondary school. No, it's not only for senior secondary school. That's false. It is for upper primary phase, junior secondary phase, and senior secondary phase. All the school external and internal ESL matters are covered within this specific language policy. That is not true, because we have mentioned that internal issues, those are created by the schools themselves. Things like, homework policy, timetabling policy, stuff like that, moderation of papers, when to submit the examination papers, how to type, and all that kind of stuff is decided by the school. And what kind of lesson plan are they going to use? Do you understand? Those are matters that the schools themselves, they create, and they are not mentioned in the language policy. All right, here we've got the multiple choice question. Which of the following is not a purpose of the language policy? And the answer is to tell teachers exactly how to help learners to learn and how to present the subject content. That is not like how exactly, like this is what you need to do when you get into the class, this is how the learners learn. And none of that information is provided in the language policy. The next one, which sample is not included? Is excluded in the language policy. That will be the syllabus. There's no sample on the syllabus. There's information about what the syllabus consists of, but we don't have a sample at the end. We only have the lesson plan, the year plan, and the scheme of work. Next, match the terms below with their best suitable description. So we've got scheme of work. Scheme of work is E, all right, a guideline. It guides the planning of the learning and the teaching, which is derived from the syllabus for each subject by the subject teacher. It's created before the first term, so this is what the scheme of work is. And then written lesson preparation, that will be C. It is a plan for content to be presented daily or weekly. It's planned before the presentation of the content by the subject teacher. Before the lesson, before the presentation, like you have to plan thoroughly and well before you come to the lesson. Continuous professional development, what is it? Is G. It's the training of the subject head for everybody in the school, teachers, HODs, or principal, as they serve the school. And also continuous professional development. It's not only done by the school, but it should be something that you do yourself. Like that's why we are advised to advance our studies, like studying further. That's all part of professional development. And then assessment is A. It says that it's guided by the DNA directives, all these circulars, the syllabus guideline, all these documents, and then it comprises of the CA tasks, projects, tests, and assignment that the learners need to complete. So that's what assessment is about. Syllabus Syllabus is B. Description of the assessment, the content, the competencies, objective purpose of the ESL subject within the curriculum. And then learning and teaching material, that is F. It could be specialized equipment, classroom, realia, guides, manuals for the teachers to use, exercise books, textbooks, used creatively and innovatively inside and outside the classroom to help with the learning of the content, learning and teaching of the content. All right, so that's what we have. The next one, we have got the different files. Administrative file, the answer is Roman 2. All right, and then question paper file. So we have got here 6. Resource file is 4. Preparation file is Roman 3. And then subject file is Roman 1. Alright, so that's what we have there. And then here we are asked to arrange the management levels of the schools from the highest to the lowest. So that's what we have. We have got HOD, subject teacher, principal, subject heads. And here at the top, we have already mentioned that is the principal who is at the top. And then we have got HOD following. And then we have got subject head and then the subject teacher. And this will be you when you go into the school right after graduating, or when you go and do your teaching practice. Mention the 14th responsibilities of a subject teacher. I think we've spoken about that, and I told you that you just don't simply copy and paste, but rather you should rephrase it. Like, what do you need to do? Talk to the parents, inform the parents what they need to do. And we have already spoken about this earlier. We don't need to go through them again. All right, and that's the end of activity 1 and the coverage of the ESL policy. Thank you very much for listening. Until next class. Bye.